Reading a fantasy novel feels amazing if you are a fantasy or fiction lover. Writing fantasy is not an easy task, and if you want to be a fantasy writer, check the following fantasy fiction writing tips. Although there are no specific rules in fantasy novel, it's your novel. You are entitled to write in your own way. But there are some things fantasy writers who as beginners often neglect the following steps in their story. So let's discuss about the small but very important fantasy writing tips. Now, tip number 1. Defining a fictitious technology. Naming a fictitious technology in your fiction or fantasy story must resonate with the readers. It's your technology you have created, but naming will give an added boost to your book. An audience should relate to that concept easily. Don't give confusing names, cluttered names that audience will denounce right away. Names must sound with a generic technical device and the technology associated with modern day lifestyle. You can see, for example, how famous authors like J.K. Rowling, Suzanne Collins created fictional names in their novels. The basic motive for a fantasy novel is to entertain the readers. Thus, if you are writing fiction, your primary job is to entertain the audience by your writing skills. We know that science fiction can be classified as hard science fiction and soft science fiction. Still, the story will sell based on the character, plotline, drama, action, emotions. You don't need to use too much scientific jargons or technical terms to make your book stand out from the peers, unless it is all about hard science fiction. Audience needs science, but they are no scientists. If they are scientists, they would have been busy doing research in scientific labs and laboratories rather than spending time on reading fantasy books. Now the question is, why one write fiction novel? It is simply to entertain the audience and readers. The audience will not be too keen to know about the technical operations of the technology you are describing in your novel. A simple description is enough to hook your audience, but digging in details to the technical terms or the technology may bore your audience and they might stop reading your book. You can also describe in details the technical terms depending on your story plotline. Remember, I am not talking about non-fiction or bio, I am just talking about fiction and fantasy. You can ask people, friends around you, that if they love fantasy movies or books, most of them would say they love both of them. But that doesn't mean they will like the technical terms associated with the books. For example, the mechanics, dynamics of an object in details in your story. In novel, it is always about the characters that stand out. An audience would want to connect with the characters of your story emotionally, be it fiction or non-fiction novel. So try to use less techno-functional terms unless your book is full of hard science fiction, as I said earlier. Nobody is interested in an inanimate object in your story. All the success of your story will depend on your representation of your characters, mythical creatures, animals, ghosts, demons, angels, dragons, mermaids, zombies, and whatever special creatures you incorporate in your novel. Number 2. Laws of world building to be followed. When you are creating the fantasy world for your novel, along with the techno terms, you got to set the laws that govern the environment you created for your novel. Is it similar to the world you are living presently, or specific to the world you have just created for your novel? So define rules and laws for your fantasy world. An audience should well understand about the rules governing them. It is preferable to create rules in a pragmatic approach, but it all depends on your story plotline. If your story demands weird conditions, you go ahead and create them. Number 3. Active voice. Although you have frequently seen or heard that you must use active voice in your writing, I would say try using active voice for your fiction writing. But passive voice can't also be denied. You can definitely use passive voice if a scene can be described in a better way. Number 4. Don't follow a cliched way or a generic plot structure. It is very important to know the cliched way of writing a story. It is your story, so try to be authentic. Any successful author must have read many books before penning down their first novel. Thus, as a new writer, we tend to follow a cliched way to start a novel, thinking that it may work fine with you. But that's absolutely wrong. So never follow a cliched way to start or to finish a novel. There are no rules actually in here. Whatever your fiction story demands, write accordingly. You have freedom to start with a dialogue or defining the exposition at the very start of your story or whatever suited for your story. Readers love to decode and read what they have not read before, so you must begin the story with some ideas that you have never read or heard before. Try to be authentic. Similarly, don't follow generic characters. Give your readers multiple characters to keep them hooked into your story. And also, I suggest finish your novel with a cliffhanger ending so that your audience will ask for more. Number 5. Think from editor's perspective. You are not in this writing field to display your passion for writing. Rather, you are here to get recognition for your work. You want your book to be the bestseller. So why do you waste time in creating a masterpiece without letting the world know about it? Thus, if you have to be a successful author, think from the editor's and publisher's point of view. You have to write what genres and what plot lines are mostly liked by audience. You have to craft your novel in such a way that you get bigger reach. Thus, you need to do a holistic research before brainstorming your story plotline. Just for an example, people love dragons in fantasy genre, so don't forget to incorporate dragon, and if not, try incorporating dragon-like creatures and define it in your novel, in your way. People bear emotions with special creatures, and thus you need to make proper study and research before writing your fiction novel. And finally, the last point, you gotta believe in your writing and also your genre. So what's holding you on? So take your pen and paper and start writing. So happy writing to all my fellow writers and authors. Share me your way of writing in the comments. See you in the next video. Cheers.